Good evening and welcome to the MUFON Central Region special presentation that we do monthly here. And you may watch this on YouTube if you wish at any time after we are finished. We are live right now. We do have a chat set up. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place them in the chat. Our guest speaker this evening is Jerred Nelson. He is a seasoned military aviator and U.S. Army warrant officer. And now he was at one time, and then now he is into the investigation and study of unidentified flying objects. In his current role as the Assistant State Director for Minnesota and North Dakota MUFON and co-director of Northland MUFON, Jerred occupies a pivotal position in the regional and national network of researchers dedicated to the scientific study and understanding of UAPs. Furthermore, as a contributing member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU, he's at the forefront of efforts to bring a rigorous evidence-based approach to the study of these phenomena, bridging the gap between anecdote and academia. Welcome, Jerred.
Hi, how are you?
So glad that you could join us and be our guest speaker this month. Of course, the title is They're Here, and that in itself is extremely interesting. So please take it away.
All right, sure, thanks. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming here tonight. Appreciate it. When I was first asked to do this presentation, it was about a year and a half ago. We were doing expos, or trying to do an expo up here in Minnesota. And I was asked to do a presentation. I had no idea what I was going to do. But then, the whole thing with all the whistleblowers and everything coming forward and government actually admitting that UFOs and USOs and all that stuff is actually real. I'm like, well, why not? This seems appropriate. We can go through some old cases and show that, yeah, they are here and they've been here for a long time. So let's kind of get started here. We'll just start off with Frank Drake. And of course, the question is, well, who the heck is Frank Drake, right? Well, he's the guy that did the Drake equation, and he's also one of the guys that helped set up the Arecibo message. The Arecibo message was conceived by Frank Drake and Carl Sagan and a few other astrophysicists. It's called the Arecibo message because the Arecibo telescope, which is in Puerto Rico, was the one that was used to send out the message, which you can see right there. It was sent out in 1974, aimed at the globular cluster Messier 13. And we realized that it's going to take a long time to get there, 25,000 years to get there. So things are moving. I mean, we're moving at 400,000 plus miles an hour through space. The cluster is moving however fast through space. However, within 25,000 years, it's still going to hit about the center of the cluster. So the information is still going to get there. So what is the Arecibo message? Well, this is it right here. It contains 8 different sections. I'll just kind of break them down real quick. This is numbers 1 through 10, atomic numbers of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, which are the elements that make up DNA. You have the formulas for the DNA. You have the number of nucleotides in the graphic of the double helix. You have the size of an average man. You also have the human population at the time, which was only 4 billion, which is kind of funny to think about. Maybe not funny, but 50 years ago, it's double already. Number 7 there, you got the graphic of the solar system, which at the time obviously included Pluto, and then graphic of the Arecibo telescope right there. So Carl Sagan was asked about the message and was like, well, what does it actually mean? And he wrote, well, the decoded message forms a kind of a pictogram that says something like this. It says, here's how we count from 1 to 10. Here are 5 atoms that we think are interesting or important, which are hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. Here are some ways to put these atoms together that we think interesting or important, which are the molecules thymine, adenine, guanine, and cytosine, in a chain composed of alternating sugars and phosphates. These molecular building blocks are put together to form a long molecule of DNA comprising about 4 billion links in the chain. The molecule is a double helix and In some way, this molecule is important for the clumsy-looking creature at the center of the message. That creature is 14 radio wavelengths high, or 5 foot 9.5 inches. There are about 4 billion of these creatures on the third planet from our star. There are 9 planets altogether, 4 big ones toward the outside and 1 little one at the extremity. This message is brought to you courtesy of a radio telescope, 2,430 wavelengths, or 1,400 feet in diameter. So like I said, it's going to take about 25,000 years for the message to get there, but it's still going to get to about the center of the cluster. Everything is still moving. It was more meant as a proof of concept than an actual conversation, because I don't think anyone's going to be waiting around 25,000 years for the answer, right? Well, where is Messier 13? If you look at here, the picture on the right is the cluster itself. I don't know if you can see my pointer here, but here's the cluster itself. If you think of the Big Dipper would be right about here on using this side over here. The Big Dipper would be right about here. If you follow the handle around, you're going to get to Arcturus. If you look up here, you're going to kind of see a U-shaped constellation. And then if you kind of keep going all the way over, you see a really bright star, Vega. Well, in between is the Hercules constellation, and you'll see a really fuzzy star right here, and that's Messier 13. So I actually checked that out a couple of nights ago. It was nice and clear here, so we went outside and took a look at it, and there it is. nice and fuzzy, but it's pretty cool. All right, so did we get an answer back in 2001? It's a possibility, but you know what? We're going to talk about that later. We're not going to read that right. We're not going to talk about it right now. So the Drake equation, right? The Drake equation was just kind of a number to kind of figure out how many civilizations are out there that are capable of interstellar communications. So how do we figure that out? Well, first we have to figure out the rate of the star formation in the Milky Way galaxy. And you can multiply that by the fraction of stars that have planets, the number of those planets that can actually support life, times the fraction of planets where life is initiated, times the fraction of planets where life has intelligent life, times the fraction of planets that life is technologically capable of interstellar communications. And then, of course, the last one would be how long is that civilization actually going to be around? Like the humans, probably not very long, right? All right, so if we plug some numbers in here, and these are the numbers that Drake used back in 61. The rate of star formation, they figured at the time, was about 2 per year, 2 to 5. Well, I just looked it up the other day. It's actually closer to 7, 8, 9 per year. So this number is actually going to be less than what we would expect. The fraction of stars that have planets, just about every star has planets. We've kind of figured that one out. And the number of planets that can support life could be anywhere between maybe 1 to 5. Planets that life is initiated, well, if it can support life, it will probably sprout life. And the number of planets that have intelligent life, well, given enough time, life will probably become intelligent. And the fraction of planets that life has invented interstellar communications, which is maybe 10 to 20%. The lifetime he has down here, though, is anywhere between 1,000 years to 100 million years. Because, I mean, who knows? We are the only place that we know for certain, absolutely, that life exists. We have no idea how long other civilizations have been here, have not been here, how long they last, etc. It's really hard to say. So he throws in the numbers, and he comes up with either 20 to 100 million planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone that are capable of interstellar communication. Like I said, these numbers are a little bit low because we know that stars form faster than they thought. But if you think about this, there's over 200 billion galaxies in the observable universe. And that equates to almost 4 trillion to 20 quintillion planets in the observable universe that are capable of interstellar communications. I got the number 20 quintillion down there. You can see that's a pretty big number. The chances that we're the only ones alone, or the only ones here, I find that very hard to believe. So then, you know, people bring up, well, what about the Fermi Paradox, right? Well, what is the Fermi Paradox? Well, it came from this physicist called Enrico Fermi. He was a physicist at the Mountain View, California SETI Institute in about 1950. One day he was at lunch with a bunch of his buddies, right? They're having lunch, doing their thing. And he just kind of blurts out, where are they? Well, everyone around the table knew what he was talking about. So the paradox is the conflict between, you're going to argue that there's intelligent life that must exist in the vastness of the universe. I mean, we just saw all the numbers, but where's the evidence, right? So you see huge numbers, but you don't actually see the evidence of that. Well, how far back in time do you really want to go to figure this out? Because who knows? We can go back about 270 million years, actually. According to ufologist Linda Moulton Howe, information that she got from an NSA insider says that the Earth has possibly been visited by beings for 270 million years. But we are the first civilization that has been, but are we the first civilization that has been here? How many civilizations have come and gone? You know, they've done their thing, they destroyed themselves, and then we started up again. How come we don't see any evidence of that? How old are the pyramids? How old is the Sphinx? You know, there's a black pyramid in Alaska. I'm sure most of you know about that one. There's pyramids in China. There's pyramids in former Yugoslavia. There's possibly pyramids down in the Antarctic. And they're all over the place. There's other things too. So maybe all that is right there in front of our eyes, and we already see it. So Linda Moulton Howe, she runs earthfiles.com. She has a YouTube channel, Earth Files. Great channel. I recommend checking that one out if you haven't already. One of her sources, another one of the government sources, said that we actually could be a big giant petri dish. In other words, the ETs come here, they create a civilization goes off the rails, they destroy them and start another one and see what happens. You know, maybe they're kind of hoping that at some point these guys are going to stop killing themselves and they'll have a success or whatever it is they're trying to do. They also said that there's probably three, I mean, if you go back to 270 million years, three specific species of ETs that have been doing this. The first one was from Alpha Centauri, which is about 4.2 light years away. Interesting enough, in 2016, they did discover a rocky-type planet that's very similar to Earth. So maybe there's life there. Procyon A and B, which is a little over 11 light years away. Supposedly the Nordics and the tall blondes come from this planet. And actually her government source has told her that the oldest race we currently know of in the 30 solar systems that we have cataloged in our galactic arm of the Milky Way, with the help of the blonde Nordics and the tall whites. That is quite interesting. I don't know if anybody have heard of the tall whites, but if you go to the Northland MUFON YouTube channel, we interviewed Charles Hall last year, and actually it's his very last public appearance, and we were able to get him, which was awesome. And he sat and talked about all of that. It was really good. Okay, and then the other place they could be from is Sirius A and B, which is a little over 8 light years away. Talk about the Nordics and some water-living humanoids. Keep that in mind, because we're going to talk about the ancient Dogons and some water humanoids that they were talking about. But before we get there, we're going to talk about Sarah Breskman Cosme. She's a hypnotherapist, level 3 practitioner of Dolores Cannon's QHHT. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. She has an office down in the Keys, the Florida Keys. She has been not hypnotizing, but helping people go through hypnosis to recover past lives and what have you. And she started running into people that were having the same type of I don't want to say life, but what they were talking about was corroborating each other. I mean, they were talking about Atlantis, they're talking about Lemuria, and it was all making sense. Let me see my second slide. Yeah, okay. So she's regressed many people. Many of them, although they had nothing to do with each other, were coming up with the same stories and corroborating each other. It's quite interesting. I saw her at Star Wars USA back in 23. It was Paula Harris's last Star Wars. And she had a really good presentation going on there. So, all right, so let's see, where am I here? So in the beginning of Atlantis and Lemuria, what happened, or at least how she described it, is that there was about 50 craft, and I don't know where they're from, but there was 50 craft that were sent to Earth as an experiment. But unbeknownst to most of the crewmen, not all of them, but most of them, the craft were designed to crash land to the point where they weren't getting off the planet. So they're being forced to colonize the planet. And that was kind of part of the experiment. One of the ships had two separate people. One person had actually established or founded Atlantis, and the other one had founded Lemuria. Now, I guess were using crystals for power, but when their ship crashed, it actually sank. They were able to get a couple of crystals up, but not very many. So over time, the Lemurians, who were living a very simple life, were able to hang on to the power of the crystals, at least be able to keep using the crystals, whereas the Atlanteans were not. They completely forgot how to use that power. I don't know what kind of other power source they were using, but they forgot how to do it. And it got to the point where they just plain got jealous, and then at that point, it starts to read like a Hollywood movie, right? They kidnapped the Lemurian queen. They destroyed Lemuria, forced her to show them or tell them how to use the crystal. She resisted for the longest time. Finally, she said, okay, fine, I'll show you. And she rigged the crystals to blow up or destroy themselves, and that's how Atlantis was destroyed. That's the story, and I'm doing it no justice at all. I highly recommend getting this book and reading through it. The story is a lot better than I can tell it. It really was very interesting. So that's how it started. Where did they go after those two places were destroyed? Because, not everybody was killed in that. Well, they made their way to Egypt. Interesting enough. But when they got there, the Sphinx was already there. I don't know if the pyramids were there or not, but the Sphinx was already there. There are several Sphinxes throughout the world. Most of them are degraded to the point where you can't tell what the heck it is anymore. But there's also a sister Sphinx to the one that's there in Egypt, buried somewhere in the sands of Egypt. And one day that's going to be found. So here's your two books. Again, I highly recommend them. Very good, very interesting books. You can get them on Amazon. Okay, so moving on here, let's talk about the ancient Dogons, right? So in 1931, French archaeologist Marcel Griaule discovered the Dogons. He was told that the Dogons had received knowledge thousands of years ago from the Nomo. Who are the Nomo? The Nomo are amphibious beings. Well, there are actually hundreds of stories about amphibious beings or gods coming down from the sky to bring knowledge to our ancestors. There's stories with the Hindus, the Greeks, the Native Americans, European, Asian, and there's many, many religions throughout the world that actually talk about amphibious beings. Originally, the Dogons had lived by the coast in Nigeria, but they fled about 1,000 years ago to avoid religious persecution of the Muslims, which is why now they're in the middle of the desert in Mali. But they still live along the Niger River. So that's kind of explains how they're able to have the amphibious beings talk to them, because obviously if you're out in the middle of the desert, that's not going to happen. But they're along the coast at the time. So let's hear the Nomo. The Dogons spoke of the Nomo, or the teachers that came down from the sky that lived in the ocean, but they helped humans. They were mermaid or merman-looking creatures, and since they're amphibious beings, they couldn't live that long out of water. And to this day, the Dogons still celebrate the day that the Nomo came out of the water. It's called the Day of the Fish. So it's really interesting. But they taught them several things. They taught them that Jupiter has 4 moons. Well, it has 4 major moons, yes. So maybe just the way that that culture, the Nomo, looked at the moons is they had to be so big, kind of like how we got rid of Pluto, right? Maybe that was kind of how they were looking at it. Taught them that Saturn has rings, that Earth was a sphere, not flat. Sorry, flat earthers. Earth is a sphere. That the Earth revolves around the sun, and that our solar system is located in an arm of the spiral galaxy. Also taught them a few things about the star which they came from, which was really interesting. So the star system, well, the Nomo were from a star that orbited Sirius A, called Sirius B. They also spoke of a third star that has not been discovered yet. However, there have been some gravitational studies that show that there's a strong possibility that it does exist and that it has an orbital period of about 6 years. So they talk about that third star. That third star is probably there. The Dogons knew that Sirius A was larger than the sun. And the thing about knowing about Sirius B, I mean, if you look at the picture here, on the lower left of the bright star, the blue and white picture, you see that little white dot. Well, that's Sirius B. Okay, there's no way anybody on Earth is going to be able to see that. I believe, this was taken by the Hubble telescope. Anyhow, they called Sirius B. They called it Po-Tolo. Po, which is a heavy serial, and Tolo meaning star, or so they called it a heavy star. Well, since then we found out that. Well, let's back up here. Sirius B was unknown to science until 1862, but even then it wasn't even proven until 1970. Then in 2005, the one more time. The Hubble Space Telescope proved them correct, which is that picture that you're seeing right there. Sirius B is actually a white dwarf. And the Dogans knew that it had a 50-year orbital period. They knew that Sirius B was actually the size of the Earth. It's white, extremely dense, and made from the heaviest metal in the universe, and it actually spins on its axis. 1 teaspoon of the material from Sirius B weighs over a ton here on Earth. How did the Nogans possibly know all this if they weren't told this? Because you can see the culture there. I don't think they have any telescopes. Anyhow, that whole culture there, it's amazing. It's really crazy. Okay, so moving on here. Look at some classical accounts here. Berosus Chaldeus and the Oannes. This kind of goes back to the whole Nomo thing. So there was a Babylonian priest, astronomer, Berosus Chaldeus, who wrote about a water monster somewhere between 290 and 278. He said that Oannes came from the sea, that it had a body similar to a fish, it had feet like a man, and it lived only in the water, and that all knowledge was received from the sea monster Oannes after the creation. Is it possible that Oannes is the same species or being? It's possible, because it's probably all around the same time frame. Some other classical accounts, and these actually, interesting thing about these is Richard Stothers had to wrote a paper for NASA called UFOs in Classical Antiquity. Why would NASA want a paper on UFOs? It's interesting. Okay, so we've got the Roman Empire. During the Second Punic War, Titus Livius in 218 BC said there was a spectacle of ships gleamed in the sky. That's 2,200 years ago. Then also at 217 BC, there was written that there was round shields were seen in the sky. Well, round shields and would probably be UFOs like this picture right here. But why else would you have things in the sky, right? During the Second Punic War, he also wrote that there was a huge stone was seen flying about. I made this one look like a rock because I didn't know how else to make it, but it's interesting to see that they would even be thinking about these things flying around, or really be writing about it, because why would they? In 173 BC, in Lanuvium, Italy, a spectacle of a great fleet was said to be seen in the sky. In 154 BC, in Campsa, Italy, weapons appeared to be flying in the sky. And when they say weapons, they're referring to shields, is kind of what the defensive weapons, shields. In 104, the people of Tudor observed weapons in the sky rushing together from east to west, those from the west being routed, a possible area attack similar to Nuremberg in 1561 or in Basel, Switzerland in 1566, and we're going to get to those too. So, you've got all these accounts going back thousands of years. AD 65, near Judea, on the 21st of the month, there appeared a miraculous phenomena, passing belief. Indeed, what I'm about to relate to you would, I imagine, have been deemed a fable were it not for the narratives of eyewitnesses and the subsequent calamities which deserve to be so signalized. For before sunset, throughout all parts of the country, chariots were seen in the air and armed battalions hurtling through the clouds and encompassing the cities. Really? Flying chariots? Because what else are they going to call it? They have no idea what these things are, right? Okay, at Campana, 2 moons rose in the daytime. Somewhere between 150 and 146 BC, a little before the Achaean War, a comet blazed out, not inferior to the sun. At first, it was a fiery red disk, emitting a light so bright that it dissipated the night. Then, little by little, its size dwindled and its brightness faded. Not ball lightning, because it's too bright. Bolide probably lasted too long. Sundogs, meteor, I don't know. I will admit to on this one though that it could have been a meteor, but it just seems like it was there for too long. But that one, I left that one in here. I got to thinking about that the other day. This one might actually be a comet, but I wanted to leave it in here, you know, full disclosure type of thing. Okay, 91 BC. There were several Romans that were on a journey. They saw a gold-colored ball roll down from the sky to the earth. After growing larger, it was seen to rise upward again from the earth toward the rising sun and block the sun out itself by its size. So it sounds like this one actually landed and then took off again. Again, with a ball lightning. Ball lightning is usually about 23 centimeters-ish, about that big, you know. And again, with a bolide, well, bolides don't come down and take off again, right? So, interesting. Again, in 91 BC, a spark seemed to fall from the star and to grow as it approached the earth. After it had become as large as the moon, light was diffused all around as if on a cloudy day, and then retreating to the sky, the object changed into a torch. So then, is he talking about a small ship from a mothership that came down? You know, a spark seemed to fall from the star, so the star stayed there, then another one came down off of it. The diffused light thing, I'm sure most of you know this one. That could be some type of energy field that was around it that was causing the light to bend or make it look fuzzy. Which is why we rarely get any really good pictures of UFOs. At least that's kind of my opinion on that. Who knows? Who knows? In 74 BC, prior to the battle between Rome and the kingdom of Pontus, which is current-day Turkey and the Black Sea area, with no apparent change of weather, but all on of a sudden, the sky burst asunder and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. In shape was most like a wine jar, and in color like molten silver. Both sides were astonished at the sight and separated. That takes some guts, landing in between two armies fighting. You know, I mean, that is amazing. Lots and lots of witnesses on here, but if it was a meteor, there was no impact, no noise, said it was white and very bright. I wish it would have said what happened after it landed, but this is all I could find on that one. But still, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Egyptian desert in AD 285. From the diary of St. Anthony, Anthony saw on the desert floor a large silver disc that suddenly vanished like smoke. After you've been doing the field investigation thing for a while, and many of you I know have, you hear this often, that a witness will see something and all of a sudden it'll just disappear. That's possible. It could have been a missing time thing, or it could be that's how they, how the propulsion system works. I don't know. In AD 196, historian Cassius Dio wrote, a fine rain resembling silver descended from the clear sky upon the Forum of Augustus. It did not, it is true, or I did not, it is true, see it falling, but I noticed it after it had fallen, and by means of it, I plated some bronze coins with silver. They retained the same appearance for 3 days, but on the fourth day, all the substance rubbed off and disappeared. And then 214 BC, and Callus, rains of chalk, 98 BC, and Rome's rains of chalk. That could possibly be angel hair, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. 214 BC. At Hadria, an altar was seen in the sky. Around it were forms of men dressed in shining white. In the district of Amiternum, in Italy, in many places, forms of men dressed in shining white were seen at a distance. They did not approach anyone. Silver bodysuit, white robes. You're going to see that one again. I'm going to get to that one later. That one is actually a really interesting one. I got pictures with that one too. You're going to like it. Stay tuned. Okay, so 8150, near the Via Campana between Rome and Capua, on a sunny day, a beast like a piece of pottery, about 100 feet in size, multicolored on top, and shooting fiery rays, landed in a dust cloud, accompanied by a maiden clad in white, again with the white clothes. There was only one witness to the event, and that was the brother of Pope Pius I. So I think that's a pretty good witness there. Anyhow, silver bodysuit, white robes. You're going to see that again. All right, so let's get into some Renaissance art. Before we do that, just to talk about it real quick, a lot of the what they call glories is where we see these objects. So art historians will say, well, that's just a glory representing the power of God or whatever, representing saints, angels, stars. They're just a symbolic thing. However, my understanding, and I'm not an art major, but my understanding, as I was digging into this, finding more about this, is that during the Renaissance, many painters ditched the whole symbolism thing and just painted what they saw or what they knew. So let's get into it. The Crucifixion of Christ in 1350. Okay, so this painting, the Crucifixion, was painted in 1350 and seems to depict a small humanoid sitting in a UFO looking over his shoulder at another UFO. So you got the one on the right looking back and the one on the left, as if in pursuit and even in a race. As he flies across the sky in what to me is clearly a UFO of some sort, the leading craft is decorated with two twinkling stars, one reminiscent of the national insignia on modern aircraft, or a roundel, for those of you who are familiar with that. I don't know why they would have a roundel on that one and not on the other one, or even if it was just a symbol of some sort, I would assume it'd be on both, but obviously it's not. So quite interesting. This painting actually hangs above the altar in Vasaki Dekani Monastery in Kosovo, Yugoslavia area. The Miracle of the Snow, 1428-1432. This is painted by Marcellino da Panicale. And for anybody that's Italian out there or speaks Italian, forgive me. I am butchering these names, and I know it, and I don't mean to. But somewhere around 1400, right? So here the artist depicts the legend of a mysterious snowfall that was said to have taken place in Rome on a hot day, again with the snow, right? August 5th, 352. The painting shows Jesus and Mary hovering over what historians describe as a cloud, while townspeople look at the snow below. The Pope and a wealthy benefactor built the Basilica di Maria Maggiore on the spot, and August 5th is commemorated every year by dropping rose petals from the dome of the church in the semi-reenactment of the event. Now, to me, for such a renowned painter, and I look at this and I see, the faces and everything just looks amazing, but the clouds just look so amateurish. I see the one that they're sitting on there and they kind of made the top look like clouds, but the rest of them, not so much. Why are they all lined up? So I could have been a fleet of UFOs or just something that he was depicting as that. I don't know. But it's interesting to note that happened, and they still, to this day, celebrate that. Okay, so we're going to get into some angels here. We'll get into the Renaissance, a little more Renaissance stuff later, but let's talk about this angel here stuff. So these pictures were taken in Florida in 2020. The person I trust, I know them, and very reliable. Very reliable. If you knew who this was, you would be surprised too. This is a very reliable source. This person wrote, "At first, I noticed a weird vacuum feeling, like something had sucked all the air and sound out of the environment. I looked at my lawn and I wondered if some kids had thrown some fake Halloween spider web stuff on my lawn. But I also noticed that it was not on any adjacent neighbors' lawns. Then I saw the angel of hair falling from the clear blue sky and assumed it was just a spider migration. I did not see a craft, just clear sky. However, the spiders only migrated onto my lawn. And as I said, my lot's only 60 feet or 20 meters wide. I went back in the house to get a plastic bagging, and when I came back out, they had stopped falling and there were clumps on the lawn. So samples were taken. About a third of a quart-sized bag was filled, but the substance turned into a gel and then would disappear. If picked up by hand, the substance would just disintegrate and disappear. Well, the bag was put in the freezer for analysis, but that person was never able to find anyone to have it analyzed, so they ended up throwing the bag away, which is a shame. It'd be really interesting to see what they came up with us on this one, because the next slide, the same thing happened in 1954 in Florence, Italy. There was a soccer game, and it had stopped mid-pitch or mid-game. So soccer match, Florence, Italy, 1954 was stopped mid-game due to a sighting of two cigar-shaped UFOs that moved slowly over the pitch. The UFOs seem to be falling apart or dropping a strange substance, a glittery, silvery substance. As people tried to gather it up, it would disintegrate as soon as it has being touched, just like the previous slide. Several people did manage to gather some of it and get it analyzed. Now, here's the interesting thing. The analysis showed a chemical makeup of boron, silicon, calcium, and magnesium. So debunkers said, well, it's just spider webs, right? Again, another spider migration. However, the chemical makeup of spider web is nitrogen, calcium, hydrogen, and oxygen, which isn't even close to what they had come up with on that. So probably wasn't spiders. And the analysis, like I said, on this one was done in several patches. The left picture here is an actual picture of it. And then the right picture here is somebody looking at it in a jar. Wish they'd gotten pictures of the ships. That would have been nice. Okay, back to Renaissance art, right? The Annunciation was Saint Amadeus in 1486. This painting here depicts the Virgin Mary at the moment she realizes that she will give birth to the Savior Jesus from a perfectly round cloud above the Virgin Mary. The beam is supposed to depict the glory of God being bestowed upon her, but then why is there a person in the background looking up at it? What is he looking at? If this was a metaphor for God or the glory of God, I don't think anybody should be looking at anything because it's just there. So again, why is this person looking at that? Did something really happen there? The Madonna was Saint Giovannino in the late 1400s. Over the shoulder of the Madonna is a UFO-looking cloud. Well, why would it even be there to begin with? And why is the shepherd looking at it? And if you zoom in, you can actually see the shepherd's dog looking up there too. And why is it just on that one spot? Now, if you look over on the left, I could probably call that thing on the left a glory. You know, maybe that was the sun or whatever, but the thing on the right, that doesn't look like it would be a glory. I would assume they would use gold or some bright colored paints. Okay, the Triumph of Summer Tapestry, 1538. The Black Hat UFOs. The Black Hat UFO seen in this tapestry is also depicted in the tapestry Magnificat from 1330, and it looks like a typical UFO. It can be seen as a political move, maybe. One could associate themselves or the authority with the UFOs. The intention might have been to show that your rule was overseen by the divine, but there's no doubt that UFOs were witnessed during this time frame. UFOs could easily have been associated with the divine or the Lord from above. But again, why would they use UFOs? That just doesn't make any sense. The glorification of the Eucharist in 1595. This one I find kind of interesting, because it's just so odd that this painting is supposed to depict the creation globe. And this might be, but it kind of looks like metalwork. You know, if you look at it, there's like that knob down on the lower left. You can kind of see a seam that comes up to the right. It looks similar to Sputnik. I'm not saying it's Sputnik because this was obviously a long time before that. But it could be just a depiction of a spherical object. And lately, we've been seeing a lot of spherical objects flying through the sky. But having no real frame of reference, the artist probably saw one of these things and just kind of associated it with the divine again, you know. So this one I find pretty interesting. Okay, Israel, put your hope in the Lord, 1600s. It is said that this painting depicts the Old Testament prophet Elijah going to heaven. Then why does it look like this object is descending rather than ascending? The object appears to be a typical UFO. As with the tapestry, is the real meaning to associate Israel with the divine by associating the church with the UFO or a heavenly body? Again, I mean, you can look at it. It doesn't look like looks like a UFO. Kind of what it looks like. Not a cloud or anything like that. The Baptism of Christ, 1710. This painting is an attempt of capturing the Bible verse Matthew 3:16, which says, "As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water, At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. Well, why is that thing perfectly round like that? What are the four beams of light that are supposed to be coming down? We did say earlier that they associate UFOs with the divine from above and can give a higher stature to whomever is using this reference. But where did they come up with the idea of using UFOs to begin with if they've never seen them? They've been around for a long time. So this is what I was talking about before. We're going to get to Nuremberg, Germany, the dogfight in 1561. This is historical news. And the basic translation of this, it says, something strange did in fact happen in Germany during the morning of April 14, 1561, between 4 and 5 a.m. Several objects were seen in the air that appeared to be in the midst of a dogfight. Well, okay, it doesn't say dogfight, but this is, like I said, kind of what it says. There's also a report of a crash, and although there has been no follow-up or information if the crash site was ever found. So the entire account was recorded by German publisher Hans Wolf Glasser. And this is what he wrote. He said, beyond balls of red color, bluish or black, and circular discs, two large pipes were seen, within which small and big pipes were found, 3 balls, also 4 and more. All these elements started fighting against one another. The fight seemed to have lasted about an hour, and then from the sun in the sky, it fell onto the earth as if everything was burning, and with great smoke, everything was consumed. So it's saying something crashed. Nobody knows where that's at. Nobody's been able to find it. I mean, this was 500 years ago, so it's probably gone by now, but quite interesting. But then 5 years later, similar incident occurs in Switzerland. And it's interesting to note that sunrise in April in these locations is a little bit after, well, actually, it's a little bit after 5, because I didn't take into account savings time. So it's still after 5. And this happened between 4 and 5 in the morning. So some have dismissed these settings as sundogs, balls of light that appear 180 degrees apart from the sun due to crystals in the air. But if they're sundogs, why are they fighting each other? That doesn't make any sense. Now, another interesting thing, crop circles. Was the mowing devil, which is what is pictured over here, written in 1678, was that the first documented case of a crop circle? Kind of hard to read over here, but basically what it says is the mowing devil, or strange news out of Hertfordshire, being a true relation of a farmer who, bargaining with a poor mower about the cutting down 3½ acres of oats upon the mower's asking too much, the farmer swore that the devil shall mow it rather than he. And lo, it fell out that very night the crop of oats showed as if it had been on all of a flame, but the next morning appeared so neatly mowed by the devil, or some infernal spirit, that no mortal man was able to do the like. Also, how the said oats lie now in the field, and the owner has not the power to fetch them away. So a flame at night, maybe there was an object out there that they kind of saw, neatly mowed or laid down. Again, is this the first actual documented crop circle? Let's get into a few other crop circles. The irascible answer in Chilbolton, England, 2001. In 2000, the crop circle appeared in Chilbolton. No one was quite sure what it depicted. It wasn't until a year later that a second crop circle kind of gave the answer. A face crop circle appeared in a field next to the Chilbolton telescope here. And 4 days later, the irascible message, as you can see over there on the upper left, showed up in the field. So let's compare these two. So here's the original, here's the answer. You get the same 10 numbers. You get silicon was added to the atomic numbers of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, silicon, and phosphorus. And actually in the 70s, it was discovered that silicon played a much larger role in DNA, because without it, our joints, cartilage, and skeleton would be very rubbery, and standing up would be very difficult, if not impossible. There was the addition of the triple helix, and engineering a triple helix DNA strand is useful for suppressing certain genes and could be useful in curing or building immunity for disease. And it seems that triple helixes are actually a marker for genetic engineering. You can see the size of the alien versus the size of the man. The alien is a bit smaller. It shows an alien population of over 12 billion. That's a lot of people. Of course, we're probably going to get there pretty soon. The solar system graphic. The solar system code as a simple line schematic from right to left. The glyph version also has a sun and 2 inner worlds. This is followed by 3 elevated icons indicating that 3 worlds in the center solar system are or were inhabited. And outside the elevated group, 2 larger or twin planets, followed by 2 smaller twins. Make sure I'm on the right page here. Okay. It's possible that the altered solar system, which is depicted in the glyph, in fact refers to this one, but at some point between before 65 million years ago. And there's several reasons for this. First, it would be extremely coincidental to also have 2 inner planets or counterparts to Mercury and Venus in our first alien communication of another solar system. Recent studies of more than 60 extrasolar systems have revealed, with only a few quasi-exceptions, none which even begin to resemble our own. The second reason for believing this is our own system is the twin planets in the glyph. Since Pluto is thought by many astronomers now to be either an escape moon of Neptune or merely an errant member of our outer solar system asteroids that could have wandered a bit too close to Neptune and was captured in a peculiar resonance type pattern. If the depiction of the system is from before the escape or that capture event, the remaining outer planets should correspond with the 2 twin outer planets in the solar system, Uranus and Neptune, and Jupiter and Saturn. The first impression of the schematic might be that these 3 elevated inhabitant planets in the glyph correspond to Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. But that wouldn't make sense. Is the 5th planet the present-day asteroid belt? Did it have some cataclysmic event and was destroyed by either a comet or perhaps themselves, like we may do someday? Or was Mars a moon of 2 planets that happened that collided and created the asteroid belt, and Mars just happened to survive? It's the explosion collision of the 4th and 5th planet 65 million, or is the explosion collision of the 4th and 5th planet 65 million years ago, which in this model right here results in the literal vaporization of the bulk of those 2 planets and the few orbiting fragments we see as current asteroids. Of course, a catastrophe would have been devastating to any life population of these former worlds. So yeah, that's possible what it could be. So it could still be a depiction of a solar system that we haven't found yet, though. The final section of the glyph, the response, appears. Okay, in place of the Arecibo telescope in the original, what they have right there was actually what the Chilbolton crop circle looked like in 2000. So maybe that's what they used to send this message, if indeed it is an answer. The TRAPPIST star system. This kind of goes with, I kind of brought this up for, to kind of show that different solar systems can be completely different from our own, obviously. With this one, the TRAPPIST star is a lot smaller, red dwarf. A lot of the planets that are closer are kind of bigger, but there are actually 3 or 4 planets here in the habitable zone. So I thought I had something on that, but I guess not. So we'll just skip that. Okay, the crop circles, Boston, Minnesota in 2008. The difference between man-made and real altered molecular. There is a difference between man-made and real crop circles. There's altered molecular compounds, physiological changes in the plants, rare radio isotopes, and hyperdimensional physics. Actually, you know what? I can work with this. Okay. So the crop circles were found near Grand Forks. Boston is a small town, population about 1,500. This is in northwest Minnesota. It happened in late July, early August. UPS driver had actually found it that morning. He went in, told the landowner. Landowner told the mayor. They also said the landowner had also mentioned that about 2 o'clock in the morning, his dogs had started going crazy, but he didn't go check to see what was going on. It still remains unsolved to this day because no one has claimed credit for it. So it's unknown how these happened. And there's three of them. I only got pictures of two, but there was actually three of them. Did Columbus see a USO? We've talked about, I'm sure you've talked about this before, or at least read about it. Around 10 p.m. on the night of October 11, 1492, Columbus spotted an eerie light glowing above the water. The following account is taken from the life and voyages of Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus and Pedro Gutierrez, while on the deck of the Santa Maria, observed a light glimmering at a great distance. It vanished and reappeared several times before the night, moving up and down in sudden and passing gleams. It was sighted 4 hours before land was sighted, and it was taken by Christopher Columbus as a sign of that they would find land. So it's kind of interesting. That's how he took it. And then 4 hours later, they actually find land. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so then we kind of get into the Puritans, early American stuff here. In Boston, 1639. In this year, James Everall, a sober and discreet man, and two others saw a great light in the sky. It stood and flamed up, was about 3 yards square, and when it ran, it contracted to the figure of a swine. It ran swift as an arrow towards the Charlton, and when it was over, they found themselves carried quite back by the tide to the place that they came from. Other credible people saw the same light afterwards at about the same place, and that came from Winthrop's journal, History of New England, 1630 49, volume 1. So when it took off, it got brighter, which we hear about. 3 yards square, which indicates it's either a sphere or a rectangle of some sort. Contracted to the figure of a swine. Does that mean it was shaped like a tic-tac? They found themselves back where they started. Does that mean it was possible missing time with that? And there were other objects, or there were other witnesses that saw the object, so you have corroboration. You got more than one person that saw it. Here's a picture of John Winthrop, Boston, 1644. The 18th of this month, two lights were seen near Boston, and a week after, the light was seen again. Rose about the northeast point of Boston and met the former, and there they closed into one and then parted, and closed and parted diverse times. And so went, flew off, and vanished. And this was at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it was seen by lots of people. So the lights joined and parted several times. Is that, again, a smaller craft joining with the mothership, or, breaking, coming off the mothership or doing something? And then, again, corroboration with others seeing the same object. Sam Drake in Boston in 1644. During the past winter, there had been seen many strange lights and many noises heard, to the great affrightment of the inhabitants. As three men were approaching the town in a boat about midnight, they saw two lights rise up out of the water near the north point of Town Cove. And after passing about in the direction of the town, they had vanished away at the south point of the cove. The lights were seen for about a quarter of an hour. So this one seems to state that the same story as John Winthrop, and happened about 4 hours later. Again, more corroboration, more people have saw this. It wasn't just one person seeing it, making up a story. This was kind of a funny one. I put this in here just as for humor more than anything else. Stockton, California, in November of 1896, Colonel Shaw driving his buggy near Lodi, California, and he saw a landed spacecraft. He said it had a metallic surface, which was featureless except for a rudder and pointed ends. Obviously not normal for 1896. So it was about 25 feet across, 150 feet in total length. He saw three slender 7-foot tall beings, typical seeing three of them. The craft emitted a warbling noise. There's actually a recording of a craft. I don't have it in this presentation, but there is that. They tried to force Shaw from the buggy to abduct him or do whatever. He said he fought back, heroically. So they gave up and went back to the ship. A mystery light then appeared over several nearby towns 2 nights later with hundreds of witnesses, some more witnesses. So possible alien abduction, but was it successful? And Shaw was only trying to save face, saying that he was the hero and fought him off. Or did Shaw really get abducted? Who knows? Well, I thought it was kind of funny, just the whole story. Aurora, Texas. I'm sure you've all heard of this one. A mystery ship crashes into Judge Proctor's windmill and destroys a spore flower bed. Well, they said there were strange hieroglyphs in the wreckage. The pilot had died in the crash. The locals described the pilot as petite, a Martian. So they decided to give him a Christian burial. They had put a headstone, supposedly they had put a headstone there to, commemorate where he was at, but we can't Nobody can locate this thing. Nobody can corroborate it. A replica was put in its place, but then, of course, it got stolen because people are like that. Supposedly, parts of the ship were put in the well. I'm not exactly sure why it's that, but where's the rest of the ship? Supposedly, there is a body still buried out there. There's been a lot of shows that have covered this. According to the cemetery records, it does say that there is a body, space body or whatever. I forget exactly what it's called, an alien body that is buried, but it doesn't say where. Cape Girardeau, Florida, or I'm sorry, in Missouri. This is in your neck of the woods. You guys should know all about this one. At 9:20, the sheriff calls Reverend William Huffman, wants to take him to a scene, an accident scene, to read last rites to some victims. He's thinking that it's over at the airport and that it was a plane crash. Of course, when he gets there, he sees that it's definitely not a conventional aircraft. He says it's a metallic saucer, no seams. It was broken open in one place. There's a body of 3 5-foot tall aliens with big heads, and one of them was actually still alive. This was World War II, so it was really easy to swear people to secrecy. So that's what they did. They swore them to secrecy. However, there were pictures taken. In the upper left, you can see that picture there. It's obviously just a recreation. That'd be awesome if that was a real deal, but it's not. But they did take a picture like that. One picture was supposed to be sent to the Reverend, and then I don't know who took the picture, but they were keeping the other one. Can't find these pictures to this day. No idea. But there are fire department and police records that confirm that something did happen that day, that the military came out and removed all the evidence, and that a picture of an alien was taken. But again, don't know where that picture's at. A Battle of L.A., February 25th, 1942. So the historians will lead you to believe that the U.S. was never bombed or attacked by the Japanese other than the balloon bombs. However, that's not true, because on February 23rd, a Japanese sub did surface and fired upon an oil field by Santa Barbara. Didn't do a whole lot of damage, but the mainland was attacked. 2 days later, between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., this craft that you can see, and these are the actual pictures, you can see this craft here shows up over LA, not talking to anybody. Nobody knows who it is, so they start shooting at this thing, right? They fired off 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft ammo and thousands of rounds of 50 cal. Now, if you take a look at this, you can see by the angle of these spotlights that the thing is not that high in the air. Anti-aircraft ammo at that time went up to almost 30+ thousand feet. And commercial airliners at the time, because we'll talk about that here in a second, would only go up to about, they'd fly around 10 to 12,000 feet, and that was it. So anyhow, we have some conflicting information from the 4th Air Force. They say there was nothing there. Well, we can see that there's something there. The War Department said, well, it was actually light planes from the subs. Yes, Japanese subs, some of them did have some light aircraft with them. I don't think they, well, yeah, they did. They could actually submerge and go underwater, and then they would come up and get the aircraft out, and they can go fly. So it's kind of crazy, but that was not the case this year, or this time. And they said, well, okay, well, then it was just a commercial aircraft that was flown by the Japanese. Well, again, commercial aircraft only fly 10 to 12,000 foot, and the anti-aircraft ammo can go up to 37. So you can't tell me that they're going to fire 14,000 rounds of anti-aircraft and miss this thing. They got to hit something. There was no bombs dropped. There was no aircraft shot down. And if it was a weather balloon, how come they didn't shoot that down, right? Well, after the war, the Japanese told them, said they were never over LA. Yes, they had bombed Santa Barbara, but they never flew over LA. So look at the picture and just try to figure it out. I mean, that's something. The Trinity crash in August of 1945. Jacques Vallée and Paula Harris wrote this book. It's a pretty good book. And then that's, I can't remember his name now. Jose Padilla, right there with Jacques Vallée. He was one of the kids that saw this thing. So Jose and I believe it was his brother, age 9 and 7, had actually saw and felt this thing crash. They said it was an avocado-shaped craft. It hit a tower on the way down, communications tower. It actually carved the ground out as it hit. There was a hole in the side of the craft, but other than that, it was actually intact. So they looked inside and they saw three creatures. And it says here that they were short. They were about the same size as the kids, about 4 foot tall. They were humanoid. They were breathing the air. They didn't have on a helmet or a mask or anything else, but they had sharp eyes. I'm not exactly sure what the definition of a sharp eye is, but it sounds kind of like, what a gray might look like. They had almost no mouth and very little nose. They were wearing coveralls that looked gray. They stayed inside the object, so the kids saw them through the opening, but they didn't actually go in. And the kids supposedly had grabbed some angel hair as a souvenir, which might have been fiber optics, but they can't find them anymore, so they're gone. But good book. Admiral Byrd. Okay, so his official mission was the scientific research and military training exercise in extreme environments. It's supposed to be a 6 to 8 month mission. However, sources say that they returned before the official ending date because of weather conditions. Well, if you're going down there to test extreme weather, why would you leave early because of weather conditions? That doesn't make any sense. Supposedly, while they're down there, Byrd had taken a small aircraft and went out and disappeared. He was gone for about 3 hours. Wasn't talking to anybody. According to his diary, as he was flying, he actually found an oasis. He was intercepted by these flying discs. They called themselves the Ariana because they took him. They came up, escorted him, took control of his craft. They landed at some base or whatever, brought him inside, talked to him, and then let him go. And like I said, they call themselves the Ariana. So maybe that was the Aryans. I don't know. But supposedly the UFOs had swastikas on them. Now, allegedly, while this happened, the rest of the fleet was attacked by UFOs while he was gone. If they were attacked by UFOs, actually attacked, it probably would have been decimated. But we'll get to that in a second here. So after the fact, there was a Chilean newspaper, the El Mercurio, had interviewed Byrd, but they kind of twisted his words around because I'm sure you've all heard where Byrd had said that America could be attacked by ships that could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. But what he actually said was, we need to be prepared to be attacked from the poles, which would make sense with Russia on their side of the earth, us on our side of the earth. The quickest way for us to get there or them to get to us is over the poles. But Byrd was debriefed in DC, and his mission was classified top secret. So, Russia in 1990, when they collapsed, had dumped a whole bunch of UFO information. And some of those documents were actually about Operation High Jump. They said that the mission was actually to find and destroy a Nazi base in the Antarctica, which would make sense given all of the firepower that they took with them, all the manpower, all the aircraft, all the ships. UFOs were present, but they didn't attack, which would make sense because, like I said, if they attacked, they would have probably obliterated them. So they only wanted just to warn them away. And according to those Russian documents, Byrd did actually disappear. He was gone for about 3 hours. He was in a small aircraft. He could have had fuel for that. The small aircraft don't burn a whole lot. But what's the truth? I don't. I've never really looked into it. I just kind of a surface look. That's all I really got on that one. So if anyone knows more about this one, I'd be interested in that. Roswell 47. Everybody knows about Roswell, right? Rancher Mac Brazel found the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico, about 75 miles north of Roswell. Brought it to the sheriff, who brought it to Colonel Blanchard at Roswell Army Airfield. So the next day, the paper reads, many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force at Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers in the sheriff's office of Chavez County. Of course, the Army retracted that right away and said, nope, sorry, that was actually a weather balloon. Then they changed their minds several decades later and said, nope, that was actually Project Mogul, which was an attempt to monitor the Soviet Union to see if they're blowing up nukes, testing nukes so we knew what they were doing. Okay, fine, but then what about the aliens that were found, right? Well, the Army had an answer for that. They said, well, actually, those are just drop test dummies for Operation High Dive. Well, Operation High Dive didn't happen in the 40s. It happened in the 50s. While Major Jesse Marcel, who was the intel officer there at Roswell, was put in charge, he brought home he brought some of that wreckage home to show his family. The wreckage had writing on it that was similar to hieroglyphs, and the generals told him that he was wrong and that he had to change the story. He's looking at the stuff, he has it in his hands, but he's wrong. So, yes, sir, got it. Changing my story because that's what you did back then. Aztec, New Mexico, 1948. This was a controlled crash, okay? And it was recovered by the military. There was a ship that was about 100 foot in diameter. It was near perfect condition, except of a hairline crack on the outside, all the way through. Well, inside this thing, when they were able to get in, because they had to use a diamond-tipped and a plasma torch, diamond-tipped drill and a plasma torch to get in through this crack. At least that's where they started to see if they could get inside this thing. They found 2 deceased 4-foot-tall grays, which they assumed were the pilots. The grays had bruises all over them and a brown hue. Maybe that was burns. They most likely died as a result of the re-entry because of the heat and pressure. There was a future-looking cockpit-type chairs in front of panels. And these panels were in like curved countertops. There was hieroglyphic-type symbols and writing all over the place. The chairs were adjustable to just about any size, so a human could sit in this thing. And the chairs seemed to be connected to some type of invisible track on the floor and glided around the panels. That may have been some type of magnetic type thing, so you can easily glide around. You wouldn't be attached. Interesting. The lower level of the craft, however, there was 14 tube-like chambers that moved in and out of the wall by the push of a cymbal. 12 of these 14 had bodies in them. 10 of them were very human-looking, and 2 were grays. So what are they going to do? They're going to start taking the gray out and see what the heck's going on. Well, once they did, they realized that this thing's still alive. And it was at that point they realized, well, hey, these tubes are actually cryo tubes. They're trying to keep everybody alive. So they sent all this stuff to Los Alamos. They were only able to revive 1 adult and 3 infants. And the infants were about 6 months old. They're very similar to Earth humans. They spoke English. They're telepathic. They did have differences in their heart, pancreas, and their lungs, and they had 2 livers. There was many interviews that were conducted, and the website right there, you can go to that and read some of those. But when the adult left, and I don't remember the whole reason or how the adult was able to leave, but he said that the babies could stay behind. So I don't know how long they were there. He was there before they said that. But they said the babies could stay behind. So there's at least 3 human hybrid aliens in the U.S. right now, maybe, if they're still around. That was in 48. Only 80 years ago. They could still be here. Eisenhower at the Palm Springs, right? So in 1954, he goes on a camping trip to Palm Springs. Supposedly, he chipped a tooth on some chicken. Air Force One comes, picks him up, takes him to Edwards Air Force Base. It was said that he went to see the dentist, but there's no dental records. It says this happened. Supposedly, he had met with Nordics, and the Nordics were going to give him superior technology and wisdom. But the only catch was we had to get rid of our nukes. Well, this was obviously during the height of the Cold War. He wasn't giving those up. It just wasn't going to happen. So, all right, well, then you don't get anything. Well, later on in 1954, he actually met with the Greys. And the Greys had agreed. So, well, yeah, we'll give you some superior tech. All we ask is just let us abduct some cattle and a few humans here and there. Well, obviously, it's probably a little more than a few humans here and there. But that was their answer to that. Now, of course, Eisenhower, I'm assuming here, this is complete conjecture from me, and from what I've seen and heard, is he kind of told the Greys, well, okay, if you abduct the humans, just make sure they don't remember, type of thing. Some humanity going on there, right? But I can't prove that one way or the other. That's just me talking. So, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in August of 1955, we had Geraldine Sutton Stiff at Northline MUFON in November. I believe it was November. Again, on our YouTube channel, Northline MUFON, you can find her presentation she did there. In 1955, one of the witnesses was out getting some water on his farm, and he said he saw the flying saucer that had landed near the house at about 7 p.m. Well, a few hours later, the dog started going crazy. They walked outside and they were confronted by these little small creatures, and they soon realized that there was a whole bunch of them. They had large eyes, a pointed head, long spindly arms and legs, webbed hands and talons. They're about 3 foot tall, wore a metallic or reflective type of suit of some sort, and it had kind of smelled like burning sulfur, so they kind of stunk. Well, they were kind of terrorizing the family the whole night, and maybe that was a miscommunication thing going on there, maybe, but the family took it as being terrorized. They'd shot at these things. One, they had actually hit one. It fell out of the tree, but then it just floated away. There, on the spot where it hit the ground, they actually saw a glowing type of liquid. There was no blood, but there was a glowing liquid on the ground, but the thing still went away. In the upper left picture there, you see them looking at an eave as they walk out of the house there. And on the upper right, you can kind of see a drawing of it. One of them had actually walked outside just to, see if they could find him or what was, protect the house. And one of them had reached down from up on top of the roof and grabbed this guy's head. Of course, they turned around, took a shot at the thing, and the thing rolled off and went away. At about 11 p.m. that night, they were finally able to go to the police station and try to tell the police what the heck was going on. So they finally convinced the police to go out and take a look. So the local police chief, state police went out. There was MPs from Fort Campbell. Place was shot up. There was bullet holes everywhere. There's shell casings everywhere. Something obviously had gone on, but they couldn't find any evidences of a hoax. So the next day, the police went back out there, and they still couldn't find anything. Well, they had witnesses sketch, what they had seen, and they're all relatively consistent with each other. Ufologist Isabel Davis had actually written a 200-page report and published it decades later, and she believes that it was all real. Well, Geraldine Sutton Stiff also wrote several books, and those are the books that we got here: Alien Legacy, Where's Kelly, Kentucky, and the Kentucky Green Men, Alien Legacy Revisited. I recommend those books too. I mean, any of the books I got on this presentation, I highly recommend. But she was family of the witnesses. She heard all this stuff firsthand, has been to the house several times. That really was a really good meeting that we had. Again, it's on the YouTube. Check it out. Nellis Air Force Base. Charles Hall. This is my favorite guy. We had this guy as a presenter. Like I said, he was his last public appearance. A weather observer at Indian Springs Bombing Range, which is now Creech Air Force Base. The story goes, at least his first encounter was he's up there on the range doing his thing, checking out the weather, reporting back. He said he saw a child out in the desert. So he's like, what in the heck is a child doing out here in the middle of no man's land? So he walked out to try to help this child. And of course, the child runs away. He tries to talk to her, kind of walks towards her real slow, tries to talk to her. And she's like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. He's going to keep running away. So he turned around and said, if you want to follow me back to the weather shack, we'll pick up the phone, try to call your parents, and get you taken care of, in case you're lost. So he walks back to the weather shack, looking over his shoulder every once in a while, making sure that she's following him, and she was. And by the time he got to the weather shack, he looked back around him, and there was another tall white with the little girl. Now, this little girl, supposedly, and you got to read his books, Millennial Hospitality. But this little girl was actually the daughter of somebody that he ended up calling the teacher. And they actually had interactions for about a year and a half out on this range. Range Fort Harry was kind of a ghost-like entity. It was just a tall white, but it was all the other Air Force guys or weather guys would call him Range Fort Harry, and they're scared to death to even go out there. Charles was not real happy about being out there either, but he survived the whole ordeal. Again, Millennial Hospitality. It's a book series. There's about 5 of them, but you get anything, whatever you need off the first one to understand it. And then from there, you're going to want to read the other ones. He did put out a new book called NW24T, which stands for Norwegians with 24 Teeth. And he talks about that too. Supposedly there was a group of aliens that had settled up here in the Duluth region of Minnesota. and they had 24 teeth. They looked just like you and me, but they happen to have 24 teeth. So he talks about that. You got to read his books. Charles Hall, great guy. Northern Minnesota, 1971 and 1972. My wife and I, this is actually one of my cases, my wife and I were up along the northern shore of Lake Superior, Minnesota, having some vacation time, staying at a place called Dodge's Log Lodges. That's a plug for them. Great place. Small cabins right on the water. Awesome spot. Anyhow, by luck, I happened to see this magazine, picked it up. I saw an ad in there that said if you'd seen anything weird up north, to give this guy a call. Well, I emailed the guy, because I'm not going to call him. Emailed him, told him who I was, that I investigated UFOs, et cetera, et cetera. He said, well, actually, I have a case up here in northern Minnesota that you might be interested in. So I said, okay, fine. Let's go up there and let's do it. So I went with him, met with the witness. And the initial case was just, he had just recently, so this was in 2019, 2020, 2019, I think it was, had taken some video of an object in the sky. He said it came in like a shooting star and then just stopped. And it was all these lights, about 4 or 5 of them, and they just kind of danced around each other. It was just kind of, almost like a mothership. They're just flying around each other. It's really weird. That one's also on our website. You can see that, or on the YouTube channel. So that was the initial case that I went up to talk to him about. Well, while I was there and I'm interviewing him on this, I'm like, well, okay, well, has anything weird ever happened to you in the past? Holy cow, I was not prepared for what I got. He said that actually at his mother's house, and we were able to go out there because his mother was still alive at the time. She's recently passed away, unfortunately. Nice gal, a really great gal. We were able to go out there, and you see the spot here on the left. That is a spot from 1971 and 1972. I believe it was in 1972 when the spot actually started. Nothing has grown there since then. So 50 plus years, and you can see it's just covered in just pine needles, and that's it. And there's no growth, no nothing. Anyhow, so they're out in this area. They got a shack that they just built. They're proud of themselves. A couple of teenagers, him and his buddy. And they saw this light in the sky, and it started coming down, getting bigger and coming closer to it. So they ran into the shack. They didn't know what the heck was going on. They ran into the shack, closed the door, standing up against the wall. And they said this thing had landed or was hovering outside. They didn't know. They didn't look. But you could see the light coming through the shack, through like the nail holes and the cracks in the wall and stuff like that. He said it was crazy. He said it lasted maybe 5-10 minutes, and then it was gone. And that was it. Well, fast forward a year later, same place with the shack. It was actually kind of a 2-story shack. It was him, his buddy, and then now his little brother. And they're inside the shack. They decided they wanted to spend the night there. So they go into the shack. They're up on the 2nd floor of this thing, and it's got like a trap door to get up there. And his brother was laying on the trap door, and then him and his buddy were laying someplace else. They said in the middle of the night, all of a sudden the room just lit up, really bright. And they're like, what the heck is going on? Well, then they heard something come on the door downstairs, and they could hear things just get tossed around and getting upset and crashing and what have you. And then all of a sudden, like out of a horror movie, this trap door starts flopping up and down. And like I said, his brother's on there, so they couldn't get up there. So they all dogpiled onto his brother to keep this trap door closed. Well, interesting enough, this witness says it lasted about 5 minutes. His brother, I had an opportunity to talk to him. His brother said it actually lasted about 20-25 minutes. So maybe something happened. I don't know, but kind of interesting. But again, it was 50 years ago, so maybe just memory is a little bit fuzzy, which could be. So everything's bouncing up and down, doing their thing. So then all of a sudden it just stops. And they're like, okay, great. Well, now they're wide awake the rest of the night. They're not going to sleep, right? They're scared to death. They're staying up there. They're not moving. They're not doing anything. The sun starts to come up. They start to get a little more courage to them. They said, all right, fine. Let's get out of here. Let's go downstairs and let's just get out of here. Well, as they went downstairs expecting to see a whole holy heck mess, nothing was upset. Everything was where it was supposed to be. No mess. Nothing broke. Really weird. Anyhow, Anna, another field investigator and the co-director of Northland MUFON, her and I came out to this spot 50 years later. Like I said, 1920, 21. I think it was 19. I don't remember exactly. I think, well, no, it was 20. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I think it was 2020. We came out here and we did some soil samples. We took some control samples and stuff like that, sent them off to the lab. The findings that we got out of this, and granted, this was 50 years ago, but the only thing we could really get out of it was that at the lower levels of the samples that we took, there was higher levels of carbonite, which is indicative of a high heat type of thing happening. I asked him, I says, now, do you remember that area being scorched when, back 50 years ago? And he's like, I have no idea. No idea. Because what he actually did is after that second incident, he took a bulldozer out there and leveled his shack. He says, I was proud of that shack, but no, he wasn't dealing with it anymore. He leveled it, and he had never gone back out there again until we brought him out there 50 years later. I was really surprised. I mean, he was okay to tell us about it, and I was like, all right, well, let's go take a look. And he's like, okay. And that's the first time he'd been out there in 50 years. Well, come to find out, his family actually has a little bit of a history, and if you got questions, we can talk about that later. But that's kind of an interesting one too. All right, so a little more famous here. Nixon and Gleason, we know that they were good friends, played golf together, talked about UFOs and aliens. Well, one night after talking about that, Nixon came by, picked up Gleason, and brought him to Homestead Air Force Base. And inside one of the buildings there was supposedly a wreckage of a UFO. There was also 6 to 8 square freezers with small bodies in them, 4 tables with a couple of small bodies on them, about 2 foot tall bodies. I mean, that's tiny. I mean, most graves, 3-4 foot tall, and these things are only about 2 foot. That's super tiny. Said they had small bald heads, but very large ears. So that doesn't sound like your typical gray. Kind of sounds like what the Stiff saw in Kentucky. So maybe that was the same type. I don't know. Well, it wasn't until 1986 that Larry Warren was actually finding this out, and that was kind of the first time that Gleason had talked about it. But that's what they came up with. It's just amazing. Alabama, December of 1990. Okay, so I know this person, right? So this person wakes up in the middle of the night. He's living in a dorm. I guess set the stage, I guess. He's on Fort Rucker, which is now Fort Novosel, right at the end of flight school. He's living in it at the time. Then they were able to live in a dorm room. And it was 3 people. You can see this is kind of how the room is set up right there, where it says me. That's a bunk bed. There's one person. He was on top. Another person on the bottom. And then there was another bunk on the lower right, where the third person was at. Now he woke up in the middle of the night. He's on the top bunk. He woke up in the middle of the night, and just the way that he was looking, he happened to be looking towards the door. And when he opened his eyes, he saw that creature right down there on the lower right, or on the lower left. He says that if that's not the same creature, that is really, really close to what he saw. He said the head was at the doorknob to give you an idea how tall it was. And he said, well, what can I do about this? I mean, obviously nothing. He didn't feel any fear, just curiosity, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. What can I do? He says, well, I could start making commotion, start yelling, screaming, make some noise, maybe wake up my roommates, maybe get some people in here to see what the heck's going on. But then he thought to himself, he says, you know what? This is right at the end of flight school. And if I am hallucinating all this, I'm going to look like a complete idiot and I might get drowned out. So he said, no, I am not saying a word. We're leaving this one alone. So he said, all right, fine. So he'd been in the military for a while, so he knew that if you're going to be observing something, you got to lay completely still. So he never even tried to move. He could have been paralyzed. He has absolutely no idea. He didn't even attempt to move. But he just checked this guy out. So he looked at his face right there, looking at his face, and then, started to look down the body, look down the right arm, nice spindly arm, long fingers. Then he got an idea in his head. He's like, hey, why don't I see if this thing's got an insignia on his chest? Maybe I could correlate that with something, military guy, he's thinking everybody's got patches. But as soon as he saw, or as soon as he thought that and started to look, the creature saw him. The creature looked over at him, pointed at him, and then he said he saw the creature tilt his head back a little bit and his mouth starting to move like he was talking. Couldn't hear anything it was saying, so maybe it was at a pitch that he just plain couldn't hear. And then it was at that point that he had heard a voice in his head, and he said it was his own voice. He said, "Close your eyes, he'll think you're asleep." And then he thought, that's a good idea. If you have a thought in your head, are you going to answer yourself? I mean, that just sounds silly, right? Anyhow, the guy closes his eyes, and then hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, he has no idea. He wakes up again, and everything is gone. He's laying in the exact same position, looking in the exact same direction, but these creatures are completely gone, not around at all. So he's thinking, well, all right, maybe I dreamt it. Who knows? Well, that next morning, as he's getting up with his buddies there to go start the day, go do whatever. It's the weekend, they're going to go do something. One of his roommates said, "Hey, where did you get those 3 welts on your back?" And he laughed it off, said, "I have no idea." And they just put on a shirt and said, "Forget it. I ain't talking about it." And it took almost 20 years before he started talking about this. But this is an interesting story. Wisconsin 2014. Okay, so this story is from an experiencer resource team, so I'm not allowed to talk about it. However, the experiencer wants to talk about it, so we're going to talk about it. This person is out deer opener in Wisconsin 2014. She got a camera with her. She takes a couple of photos with the camera, just real quick session, just to make sure that it's working. And when she got home, she saw this. Now, she was only out there for about an hour before she just felt wrong. They said it was just had this overwhelming feeling to leave. So she left. But these are the pictures that she took. And you could see this entity floating. And the one on the left is the first shot, and the one on the right is the second shot. So it almost looks like it looks over at her. Now, maybe this is actually, and I know I dare not say it, maybe a ghost, right? But I wanted to include this because this kind of starts the whole experiencer thing for her. So, okay, so moving on here. We talked about this, and I said, well, has anything else ever happened in your life that's been really strange? It says, well, as a matter of fact, yes. And she starts telling me the story about James. She got here, James wears a white robe. Well, in 1979, in May, she had just gotten done with college. She's out dropping off resumes. She's on her motorcycle, a little dirt bike or whatever. And she's going back to her apartment because it's the end of the day. She had to drop off one more resume, but other than that, she's going back to her apartment. And she came across this guy wearing a white robe, a monk type of robe. So she just had to stop and say, what in the heck? What's going on here? Who are you? So she asked him, are you an apostle or something? And he said, I used to be. Interesting. So I said, well, can you describe this guy? He says, well, yeah, he was about 5'10", average build, average height. He had kind of a gold hue to his hair. He had a white robe. And I said, well, what did the robe look like? He says, well, similar to what a monk might wear. He said he had a rope around his waist, and said, well, it might have been twine, something natural. The guy had no idea who the president was. And she said the really weird thing, though, was he didn't look like he was touching the ground. It's like maybe an inch or whatever off the ground. It's like he would never touch the ground. Well, being the curious person that she was, she sat and talked to him for a while, and they talked about astrophysics and space travel, some really heavy stuff. And he said that there was just one message that he wanted to convey to her, and that was time has stopped. No idea. To this day, she still has no idea what the heck that meant. Now, if you look in this guy's glasses, before I go on to the next slide, if you look in this guy's glasses, you're going to see on the right lens there a guy wearing a white robe. Now, just so you know, that this picture has no relationship to what happened with this James wears a white robe other than the person you see in the glasses. These are two completely unrelated. These people don't know each other. When this picture was taken, there's only two people there. the person getting the picture taken and the person taking the picture. These guys swear up and down that they never saw the guy in that white robe. And if you look over in the left lens, you're going to see about half a dozen of them standing there too. So they never saw him. They weren't there. But this is what this experiencer saw, was the guy in the white robe. Okay, so moving on. She had invited her to her house because he had no place to stay. He had, the guy's got to eat or whatever, and she was just being nice. So when he got up, she noticed that he wasn't even dirty. They were sitting on the ground for a half hour talking, and when they got up, he wasn't even dirty at all. So she gave him directions to her house. It's kind of a complicated route, but we'll get there. She's on her motorcycle. She said it was going to take her about another half hour or so to get there on motorcycle. So it's going to be a while for him to walk. So she goes and drops off his resume, goes and finds the phone, because obviously didn't have cell phones in 79. Calls her roommate to warn her that, hey, this guy, James, is going to come by wearing a white robe, blah, blah, blah. And as she's talking to her roommate says, guy's already here. She's like, how can you possibly be there already? It takes me a while to get there, and I got wheels. Says, well, actually, 1 step for me is like 1 mile for you. I don't know what that means, but that was, what she relayed. So anyhow, she gets home, makes dinner, chicken dinner. But James wouldn't eat any of the chicken. He would only eat, he had a sack on his waist that had some beans in it, and that's all he would eat. She said it was really interesting that the cat there would only eat the beans too. The next morning, so they go to sleep. He sleeps on the couch. They sleep, wherever. The next morning they get up, and he abruptly has to go. He says, well, I'll see you again. I know how to find you. He walks out the door. She chases him outside the door. But as soon as she gets outside, guy's gone. Fast forward, a year later, May 1980. They're moving to New Hampshire now. Completely different spot, right? Well, when they drive up to the house, James is already there. And he's with another guy, right? So he knew where she was going to be, which is really weird. She asked him, says, well, where have you been? He says, well, they have a ship that they have to go to every year. Well, you wouldn't elaborate. That was all he said. Well, her friends thought, this guy's just a nut, just a lunatic, don't bother talking to him. She's like, well, how did he find her? How did you find me or whatever? She's got to go move some stuff in. He says, don't worry, I'll find you again. And she's like, just wait here just a second. She brought some stuff in the house. She came back out. Guy's gone. Nothing. Still gone. And she still doesn't understand, what the heck do you mean by time has stopped? I don't get it. Fast forward another year. This time, they're in a different town. They're going out to eat. There's in Hillsborough, New Hampshire this time. They get out of the car to go to the restaurant. As they're walking to the restaurant, she looks over and sees about 22-ish people standing around on the corner, and they're all dressed in white robes, just like you see in this guy's glasses here. So she runs over there and says, hey, are you guys friends with James? And they're like, well, yeah, we know who he is. And he says, well, where are you from? And before they would answer that, they said, well, we have a message for you. It's like, well, okay, well, what's your message? She says, well, people have forgotten to take care of each other. So it's like, okay, fine. Well, where's James? Where are you guys from? What's going on? Well, they wouldn't answer her. They just kept saying, it was almost like it was a program message type thing, like Mr. Roboto, It's like, people forgotten to take care of each other. People forgotten to take care of each other. Well, her friends came over and they're like, dude, man, you're talking to homeless people, crazy people. Let's go back in the restaurant, or let's go into the restaurant and get something to eat, and you need to stay away from these people. Well, they're trying to drag her away. When she looks back to talk to these people, they're all gone. Again, they just disappeared. Fast forward another year. Now she's in Concord, New Hampshire, right? She's helping another friend move. She finds this newspaper, which is the Concord Monitor, May 1982. I tried to find it, but I believe it's only in print, so I'm going to have to go to New Hampshire to get that. I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. Anyhow, she finds his picture in this newspaper, and he's quoted as saying that he is there at the Capitol to check on the Capitol to make sure that people were taking care of each other. Well, of course, she cuts this out, puts this in a dream journal so she can have it. Well, 2 weeks later, it's gone. And she never saw James again. That is an amazing story. Absolutely amazing. And like I said, this picture here just blows me away because these guys never saw these guys in white, but they were there. Okay, Vegas 2023, right? Because we have to talk about this one. There's a green streak through the sky, which I think now was probably just unrelated. This family, these guys felt something land. They saw it. They did see lights outside, but they felt something land. They could hear footsteps on the ground and on the roof. They saw these aliens. Supposedly they're 8 foot tall, big eyes, shiny eyes. They had grayish, greenish skin color. The police had actually set up a surveillance system the next day at their house. Why would they do that? That's just crazy. So I think I've got a couple of videos here. Yeah, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but we'll just play some of it here. I'll probably end up fast forwarding. But look up here. You're going to see like a shadow, but it looks more like a solid being of some sort. So let's just play this. Okay, we're going to fast forward this.
Jerred, we can't hear anything.
Okay.
You're going to have to, if you go into, you're going to have to stop your presentation. And then when you do present, you'll have to say share sound.
Okay. Well, we'll just skip the sound part. I'll just kind of fast forward and show you a few things here. So don't worry about the sound. It's just some reporter talking in the background. I'll just kind of narrate a little bit here. So what we're looking here, as you can see, like that black blob right there. And they talk about that. If it was a shadow, you think that it would, you should be able to see the kind of the tree behind it a little bit, but it's almost like it has mass to it. Like there's something there. And in the fence over here, you can see something moving through there. So, you can find this on YouTube. There's the title of the video right there, so check that out. So we'll skip this one. And we'll move on to the next one here. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, now this one's more of a close-up of the fence itself, and you can actually see something behind the fence, which is amazing. So you're not going to be able to hear audio on this either, but that's okay. I'll just narrate it a little bit. Okay. Okay, here we go. Right down in there. And this thing's going to try to move it around a little bit. Yeah, he's kind of long-winded here. I know you can't hear him, but just kind of watch this general area here. And as once he starts playing it, you're going to see movement in there. You can actually see where the arrows were right there. Might have actually been like fingers or something. Yeah, you see that? Right there. And then you can see over here in the middle, almost like a face coming through. So this is the title of this one right here. Again, you can find this on YouTube. So you get an opportunity to check it out. Both of these I found really fascinating. Okay, so they're here. They have been here for a long time. Many civilizations. Where do they come from? Why are they here? I don't know. Why don't they show themselves? I don't know. But there we have it. Thank you. I'll take questions if anyone has them. See if I can figure out how to stop share.
Okay, I'm going to show this comment from Larry.
Okay. Is Richard Siller's paper available? I believe it is. You can probably find that on the internet. Because that's where I got it, really, was that. And I don't remember exactly what I was looking up. I got some notes on it here, but yep, it's Is it? No, that's not it. Anyhow, you can look that up. Just look up Stothers and on the internet, and you should be able to come up with that paper. Okay. I missed the rest of that. I didn't know what it was like. I didn't know it was the other lecture that had. Okay, so 20 billion planets likely to have life. Yes. Well, there you go. I agree with you. He didn't factor in all that other stuff. He only factored in our three-dimensional world that we are familiar with. And theoretically, there are hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of other dimensions, an infinite amount of dimensions. There could be creatures there too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I have a question for you, Jerred.
Yes.
Have you ever had an encounter with a non-human entity or UFO?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
Actually, I did. I talked about it in the slides, but I didn't say it was me.
Okay.
But I did talk about it. And we'll just, if people have other questions, we can get to that. And if people are dying to hear that, about that, we can talk about that later.
I don't see any more questions.
Oh, here. You're going to make me talk about it, aren't you?
Yeah. So I kind of would like for you to, if you wouldn't mind.
I don't mind. That's fine. Okay. So the flight school story, the guy in the barracks that saw the creature by the door, that was actually me that saw that. So I wake up in the middle of the night. I see this creature there. Before all these other things, I look over and I see the shadow of another creature who was doing something to my bunkmate underneath me. I don't know what, but he was doing something because you could tell that it was moving and doing something. And I had the feeling there was a third one in there, but I never saw it. That was just a feeling. Mm-hmm. So everything else, like I said, I talked about, I was, do I get people's attention? What do I do here? I was like, that ain't going to work because I don't want to look like a fool. I want to graduate flight school. That's a big deal to me. So I just looked this thing over, like I said, at the point that I said, I want to see if this thing's got an insignia on. That's when it saw me. I could tell that it was talking to these other guys saying, hey, this bozo up here is awake, this human, this gorilla or whatever, put him back under. The welts on my back, where did those come from? Obviously, they must have some type of tech. It's not, we say telepathic all the time, but there's got to be more to it. Charles Hall had actually talked about the tall whites, that they had a headgear of some sort, some type of technology that they could project emotions to whomever. And in this case, it would have been to Charles, But it also worked the other way. He has this story that he saw these white things going across the range, and he thought it was just like a tarp or plastic something. So he was just thinking in his mind, says, well, I probably should go get that, rip it up, and then put it in the garbage. Well, lo and behold, it was actually two tall whites, and they got the impression that Charles wanted to tear them apart and put them in the garbage. Even though Charles was thinking it was just garbage to begin with, he didn't realize that it was actual beings. But the beings took it as he wanted to attack us and kill us,
Right.
So you've got the telepathic part, but then a lot of that, I say a lot of it, I don't know if it's a lot, but there is that other part that is technological that we just can't discount. And I think the government's actually been working on that type of technology as well.
I'm sure they have. Got a question here?
Did I see any UFOs while flying an aircraft? Actually, I have never seen a UFO flying in an aircraft. I have been able to identify everything that I have seen. And I would really love to see a UFO while flying an aircraft. I'd love to see a UFO sitting on the ground. But no. Yes, that series is absolutely fascinating. And you have several Charles's presentation. Well, I tell you, Larry, Northland MUFON, check out our YouTube channel, check out our website. We were lucky enough to have him last year as a presenter. It was great. Awesome.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
What about near-death experiencers?
A lot of the whole ET experience thing, I have found that those people that have had near death experiences are more open to it. I don't know why. I don't know if it's some type of consciousness awakening
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, I have my beliefs, but maybe at that point you've gotten closer to the whole consciousness type thing that when you come back, your mind is more open to it. I think we all have the ability, but for whatever reason, most of us can't do that type of thing. But maybe that whole death thing opens that up for you. I don't know, but yes, I would agree with.
I agree as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And finally, this is what Carl Harper says.
With all of this, why do people say there's no proof? Carl, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. The proof is out there. I mean, look at all those stories that I just went through.
Mhm.
Charles Hall, I don't understand why we don't talk about Charles more often than we have. I mean, unfortunately, Charles is kind of at the end of his deal. He's not appearing public anymore. He's not really talking anymore. But the story that he had, it was amazing. This guy spent a year and a half, was never told that he had to shut up about it. In fact, he was told he could tell whoever the heck he wanted, but nobody believes him. I mean,
Right.
it's just, Margie, you know this guy. He's credible. He's amazing. He's the nicest guy you ever met. He's smart, and I don't understand why. And all of you followers, this happened in the '60s. Why we have ignored the man for so long? I mean, he's got all the answers.
Yep. Him and many others.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Jerred. This was absolutely fascinating. And I know how much research went into that. So thank you for that.
you're most welcome. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I had a good time. Thank you.
All right. Jerred Nelson, everybody, thank you again, Jerred. And thank you, everyone who is watching this now and in the future. And check out Central Region MUFON at centralregionmufon.org.